Good evening. Tonight we begin with something unexpected yet familiar. Codependency, but not as you imagine. Nothing about grand therapeutic interventions or clinical analyses. This time you'll be just you. An ordinary person living among the invisible chains of emotional attachment. So before you get comfortable, like this video and subscribe. If this truly speaks to you, now adjust your light, take a deep breath, and let's journey through the landscape of your relationships together. You're awake again, aren't you? The digital clock casts a soft blue glow across your bedroom as your mind replays today's events like an old film reel. You wonder if you did enough, if you were enough. The ceiling above becomes a canvas for your thoughts as you remember how you rearranged your entire schedule this morning to help your colleague with their presentation. You didn't mind, you tell yourself, even though it meant skipping lunch.
And rushing through your own deadlines. It's what good people do, isn't it?
Help others, be there, sacrifice. Perhaps you recognize this pattern, this gentle erosion of your own needs that happens so gradually you barely notice it. The way you've become fluent in the language of others' desires, while your own have become foreign syllables on your tongue. You speak their wants with perfect diction but stammer when asked about your own. When was the last time someone asked what you needed? When was the last time you knew the answer? The ancient Greeks had a concept called kenosis, the act of emptying oneself. It was meant to be divine, this emptying, a spiritual sacrifice. But yours isn't divine, is it? It's habitual, automatic. You pour yourself out for others until there's nothing left but the hollow echo of your own unmet needs reverberating against your ribs. You've become so accustomed to the feeling of emptiness that fullness seems almost threatening. Remember that restaurant last week? How your friend ordered the last slice of cheesecake, your favorite, and you smiled and said you weren't hungry anyway. That small moment, so insignificant it seems silly to even mention. But it's in these tiny surrenders that your pattern reveals itself. The quiet voice inside you that whispered, "I wanted that," was silenced so quickly you barely registered its protest. Tonight, as you lie here, I want you to imagine your needs as tiny stars, distant but essential points of light in your universe. What would happen if you allowed them to shine a little brighter? Not a supernova explosion of selfishness, just a gentle increase in luminosity. Just enough so you could navigate by their light. What constellations might they form if you connected them? What shapes might your authentic desires create in the night sky of your life? The rain begins to fall outside your window, droplets painting wet trails down the glass. But there's another storm you're tracking with far more precision, isn't
there? Your partner came home quiet today. Their shoulders were a little lower, their smile didn't reach their eyes.
And just like that, your internal barometer shifted. The pleasant evening you'd been enjoying clouded over as you began your familiar weather-watching routine. "Is everything okay?" you asked, your voice carefully modulated to sound concerned, but not pushy. And when they said, "I'm fine," you didn't believe it for a second. How could you? You've become an expert meteorologist of moods, detecting the slightest changes in atmospheric pressure in the people around you. A sigh from your mother on the phone can send you into a spiral of worry. A curt text from your friend can ruin an entire afternoon as you analyze what you might have done wrong. You've developed this skill over years, haven't you? This ability to read the emotional room, to sense the invisible currents of feeling flowing around you. It began as survival, perhaps, a child learning to predict a parent's mood swings, a partner navigating the unpredictable terrain of a volatile relationship. But now it's become your default setting. You can't turn it off. The weather radar in your mind constantly scans for approaching emotional storms, not just to prepare yourself, but because you believe it's your responsibility to change the forecast. When your colleague seems stressed, you bring them coffee without being asked. When your friend sounds sad, you cancel your plans to be available. You've become convinced that their emotional weather is somehow your responsibility, that if they're unhappy, it must be partly your fault and therefore yours to fix. You exhaust yourself trying to be everyone's emotional umbrella, their shelter from the rain. What would happen, I wonder, if you stepped out from under the weight of this responsibility? If you acknowledged that people's emotions are like weather, patterns, complex systems influenced by countless factors beyond your control? You are not the sun that causes the rain, nor the wind that drives the storms. You are simply another person, standing beneath the same vast sky, experiencing your own weather. Your phone buzzes again. It's late, too late for a non-emergency. Call, but you reach for it anyway. Your friend needs a ride home from a party. You glance at the clock. 1:27 a.m. You have an important meeting tomorrow morning, one you've been preparing for all week.
You need your sleep. This thought forms clearly in your mind, and for a moment, you consider saying no. But then it begins, doesn't it? That familiar dance of anxiety, the rehearsal of all possible negative outcomes if you were to refuse.
Would they be stranded? Would they be angry? Would they think you don't care? Would this be the final straw that breaks your friendship? The scenarios multiply in your mind, each one worse than the last, until saying yes feels like the only possible choice. So you get up, put on your shoes and grab your keys, ignoring the protest of your tired body. Boundaries are curious things, aren't they? For most people, they're like fences, clear, visible demarcations between what's acceptable and what isn't. But for you, they're more like lines drawn in sand, constantly shifting, easily erased by the waves of others' needs and your own anxiety. Each time you try to establish one, your heart races, your mouth goes dry. The words "I can't" or "I don't want to" feel like stones in your mouth, too heavy to push past your lips. This hesitation has ancient roots. Perhaps it began when you learned, through subtle or overt lessons, that your worth was measured by your usefulness to others. That love was conditional upon your compliance. That conflict was dangerous. So you learned to bend, to accommodate, to say yes when every cell in your body was screaming no. You became a master contortionist, twisting yourself into shapes that would fit whatever space others allowed you. But boundaries aren't walls built to keep people out. They're more like the banks of a river, necessary channels that allow your energy to flow in healthy directions rather than spilling out everywhere, until you're nothing but a dried-up riverbed. Without them, you give and give until there's nothing left but resentment, a bitter pool at the bottom of your empty well. What if, just for tonight, you imagined your no not as a rejection of others, but as a gentle yes to yourself? What if each boundary you set was actually an act of love, not just for yourself, but for those around you? For how can you truly give from an authentic place when you've allowed yourself to be depleted beyond recognition? You're sitting in a restaurant with friends, the menu open before you. "What do you want?" someone asks, and you feel that familiar blank sensation wash over you. What do you want? Such a simple question, yet it echoes in your mind like a shout in an empty cavern. You scan the menu, looking for clues, watching for what others might choose. "I'm fine with anything," you say. Or, "What are you having?" It's easier this way, to follow rather than to lead, to reflect rather than to decide. This goes beyond food choices, doesn't it? When someone asks how you're feeling, you often need to stop and think, Not because you're considering whether to share, but because you genuinely don't know. Your emotional compass has been pointing toward others for so long that you've forgotten how to read its direction for yourself. Your own internal landscape has become foreign territory, a place you rarely visit. You've become fluent in the language of accommodation. Whatever you want is fine with me might as well be your personal motto. Not because you don't have preferences of course you do, but because you've buried them so deeply beneath layers of compromise that excavating them feels like an archaeological dig through your own psyche. It's easier, less complicated, to simply adapt to the desires of those around you. There's a phenomenon called emotional fusion, where a person's identity becomes so enmeshed with others that they lose their sense of self. Your emotions become reactions to others rather than authentic expressions of your own experience. You're happy when they're happy, devastated when they're upset. Like a chameleon, you've adapted to blend seamlessly with your environment, changing colors to match the emotional temperature around you. But in this constant adaptation, the true pattern of your own skin has become almost invisible, even to yourself. Think of a musical instrument that hasn't been played for years. The strings grow tight or loose, the wood dries out, the sound it once made begins to fade from memory. Your authentic voice is like that instrument, still capable of beautiful music, but in need of care and practice to remember its true sound. Your needs and feelings haven't disappeared. They've simply gone dormant, waiting for you to remember how to express them. Tonight, as you drift towards sleep, I invite you to place a hand over your heart and ask yourself one simple question. What do I feel right now? Not what should you feel or what others want you to feel, but what actually lives in your body
At this moment, it doesn't need to be profound. It doesn't even need to make sense. It just needs to be true.
This is the first note in reclaiming the forgotten melody of your authentic voice. The evening shadows grow longer across your room as you remember that argument last week. It wasn't even a significant disagreement, just a small difference of opinion about which film to watch, but you've replayed it countless times since then. You apologized almost immediately, didn't you? Even though you weren't really wrong, even though your preference was just as valid as theirs. Something in you couldn't bear the momentary tension, the subtle withdrawal of warmth in their eyes. It felt like standing on the edge of an abyss. This fear lives in you like a shadow, doesn't it? Always there, even on your brightest days. The fear that if you step too far out of line, if you assert yourself too strongly, if you become too much or not enough, the people you love will simply leave. And so you've become exquisitely attuned to the subtle signs of displeasure in others. A brief silence on the phone, a delayed response to a text, a slight change in tone. Each one triggers a cascade of anxiety, a desperate need to fix whatever invisible thread has begun to fray. Perhaps you can trace this fear back to its origins, a childhood where love felt conditional, an early heartbreak, a friendship that ended abruptly. Or perhaps it simply grew over time, nourished by small rejections and misunderstandings that you internalized too deeply. Whatever its source, this fear has become a constant companion, whispering that you must be perfect, accommodating, selfless, or else face the unbearable pain of abandonment. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from this vigilance, always watching, always adjusting, always trying to secure the emotional perimeter of your relationships to prevent anyone from slipping away. You've built elaborate systems of prevention, being the first to call or text, remembering every birthday and anniversary, offering help before it's even needed. You believe, somewhere deep down, that if you make yourself indispensable enough, no one would ever choose to leave you. But relationships aren't transactions, are they? Love isn't something you earn through perfect performance or purchase with self-sacrifice. The painful irony is that in your desperate attempts to prevent abandonment, you've abandoned the most important person of all, yourself. You've left behind your authentic needs, desires, and boundaries in the pursuit of a security that always seems just out of reach. What would it feel like, I wonder, to rest in the knowledge that some people will stay, not because you've earned it through constant vigilance and sacrifice, but simply because they choose to? What if the right people in your life would remain, even if you were sometimes inconvenient, occasionally disagreeable, periodically unavailable? What if you are worthy of that kind of love simply because you exist? The morning routine is always the same, isn't it? That moment in front of the mirror, studying your reflection. But you're not just checking your appearance, you're preparing your performance. Will they like this version of me? You silently ask. Is this the right persona for today? Like an actor with multiple scripts, you've learned to adapt yourself to each audience. The competent professional for your colleagues, the supportive friend who never burdens others with problems, the agreeable partner who rarely rocks the boat. Each role carefully crafted to earn approval, to avoid criticism, to be worthy of love. You've become a collector of compliments and positive feedback, haven't you? Storing them like precious gems to take out and examine when self-doubt creeps in. At time your boss praised your presentation. The friend who said you're always there when needed. The partner who called you perfect. These moments sustain you, briefly silencing the persistent question that haunts your quieter moments. Am I enough? Without this external validation, you feel untethered, unreal somehow. Your sense of self-worth rises and falls with the opinions of others, like a boat on a stormy sea, with no anchor of its own. A casual criticism can devastate you for days. A perceived slight can send you into hours of rumination. You find yourself constantly scanning social interactions for clues. Did they enjoy your company? Did you say the right thing? Were you interesting, helpful, likable enough? There's a concept in psychology called the looking glass self. The idea that our sense of identity is shaped by how we believe others perceive us. But for you, it's gone beyond influence into dependence. The mirrors of others' perceptions haven't just shaped your self-image, they've become the primary way you know yourself at all. Without their reflection, you feel invisible. This dependence creates a particular kind of vulnerability. When your worth is externally determined, you become reluctant to express opinions that might be unpopular, to set boundaries that might disappoint others, to reveal authentic parts of yourself that might not receive immediate approval. You've learned to edit yourself in real time, filtering out anything that might disturb the delicate balance of others' good opinion. What would happen if you began to build an internal mirror? One that reflects back not what others think of you, but what you know to be true about yourself. Not your accomplishments or your usefulness or your ability to please, but the essential qualities that make you uniquely you, your values, your compassion, your resilience, your humanity. A mirror that doesn't distort based on others' expectations, but shows you clearly, kindly, completely. Tonight, as the world grows quiet, I invite you to close your eyes and imagine looking into such a
mirror. What would you see there? What would you want to see?
This isn't about vanity or self-aggrandizement. It's about beginning to know yourself from the inside out rather than the outside in. It's about finding the courage to exist even when no one is watching, to matter even when no one is praising, to be worthy even when no one is validating that worth. The menu sits before you, filled with possibilities. The waiter has returned twice already, but you're still undecided. Just one more minute, you say, with an apologetic smile. This hesitation isn't really about food, is it? It's about the weight of decision-making itself, the way even small choices can feel overwhelming when you've spent so long deferring to others. Decision paralysis has become your familiar state. What movie to watch? What outfit to wear? What career path to pursue? Whether to stay in a relationship or leave? The questions vary in significance, but your response remains the same. Doubt, delay, and an almost instinctive turning toward others for guidance. What do you think I should do? Has become your reflexive question, asked of friends, family, partners, sometimes even casual acquaintances. Anyone to relieve you of the burden of trusting your own judgment. This difficulty didn't emerge overnight. It grew gradually as you learned to distrust your own perceptions and preferences. Perhaps you were told too often that you were wrong, or had your choices criticized or dismissed. Perhaps you watched as your decisions led to disapproval or conflict. Or maybe you simply absorbed the subtle message that others knew better, that your role was to follow rather than to lead, even in the domain of your own life. There's a concept called learned helplessness, a state where a person has been conditioned to believe they have no control over their situation, even when opportunities for change become available. Your hesitation with decisions reflects a particular kind of learned helplessness, not about your ability to act, but about your ability to choose wisely without external guidance. The paradox is that while avoiding decisions may temporarily relieve your anxiety, it ultimately reinforces your sense of incapacity. Each time you defer to others, you miss an opportunity to develop trust in your own judgment. Each time you seek consensus rather than listening to your inner voice, that voice grows a little quieter, a little less accessible when you need it. Most decision-making is like a muscle. It strengthens with use and atrophies with neglect. Your capacity to make choices hasn't disappeared. It's just been underused. And like any underused muscle, it may feel weak and unreliable at first when you begin to exercise it again. The first few independent decisions might feel frightening, might even lead to mistakes. But this is how capacity builds, not through perfection, but through practice. What if you started with the smallest decisions? Not the life-changing ones, but the everyday choices that carry less weight. What if you ordered a meal without asking for anyone else's opinion? Chose a film based solely on what appeals to you? Selected an outfit without seeking approval? These might seem like insignificant acts, but they are the building blocks of autonomy, small declarations of trust in your own preferences and judgment. The night has deepened now, the world outside your window grown quiet. But inside you, something has begun to stir. A recognition, perhaps, of patterns long invisible despite their powerful influence on your life. These 7 signs of codependency we've explored aren't indictments or diagnoses. They're invitations to greater awareness, to gentler self-understanding. They're landmarks on a map that can help you navigate toward a more authentic way of being in relationship, both with others and with yourself. The journey ahead isn't about dramatic gestures or sudden transformations. It's about small, consistent shifts in how you relate to yourself and others. It begins with awareness, simply noticing the patterns as they emerge in your daily life. That moment when you automatically silence your needs. The instinctive way you absorb others' emotions, the anxiety that arises when you consider setting a boundary. Awareness alone doesn't change these patterns, but it creates space around them, allows you to see them as learned behaviors rather than inevitable truths about who you are. From awareness comes the possibility of choice, not always easy choices, but choices nonetheless. The choice to express a preference even when it might not please everyone. The choice to acknowledge that someone else's emotional state belongs to them, not to you. The choice to set a gentle boundary even as your heart races with anxiety. The choice to tune in to your own feelings even when they're complicated or inconvenient. Each choice is a small act of courage, a quiet reclamation of your authentic self. This path isn't about swinging from one extreme to another, from complete self-sacrifice to rigid self-interest. It's about finding balance, about creating relationships, where both you and others can exist as whole, separate individuals who choose connection, rather than depend on it for survival. It's about discovering that healthy love doesn't require the dissolution of self, but rather the full presence of two complete people. There will be discomfort along this path. Old patterns don't release their hold easily, and those accustomed to your codependent behaviors may resist your changes at first. There may be guilt as you begin to care for yourself in ways that feel unfamiliar, and perhaps even selfish. There may be fear as you step into greater authenticity without the protection of people-pleasing. These feelings aren't signs that you're doing something wrong. They're natural responses to change, to growth, to the recalibration of relationships that have operated on unbalanced terms. Remember that healing isn't linear. There will be days of profound insight and courageous action, followed perhaps by days when old patterns reassert themselves. Progress often looks like 2 steps forward, 1 step back, a dance rather than a direct march. Be gentle with yourself. In these moments of regression, they're not failures, but opportunities to practice self-compassion, to remember that transformation is a process, not an event. As you drift towards sleep tonight, I invite you to hold this truth close. Codependency may be part of your story, but it isn't the whole of who you are. Beneath these learned patterns lies your essential self, a self capable of both giving and receiving, of both connection and autonomy, of both loving others and honoring your own heart. This self hasn't been lost, merely overshadowed, and with each small act of awareness, each moment of conscious choice, you invite this authentic self back into the light. Rest now, knowing that awakening to these patterns is already an act of healing. The path forward will unfold 1 step at a time, 1 day at a time, 1 choice at a time. You don't need to rush or force the process. Like all meaningful journeys, this one happens at its own pace, revealing its wisdom gradually, in its own perfect timing. So I think you must be dreaming about all of this by now, so I'll just leave the fireplace burning to keep you feeling comfortable and warm. Sleep well, knowing that even in rest, healing continues its quiet, transformative work.